Joining us now from 97.3 ESPN.com, it's Frank Klose. As Frank, we thought the Phillies might be active today. They went a little early and made a couple of deals on, I guess, Saturday. They trade Jeremy Hellickson to Baltimore. Howie Kendrick goes to Washington, to the Beltway. Some phone lines
that
were
Saturday
busy.
is a technicality. I mean, it was like Friday. They announced that one pretty quick. Then
Yes.
Saturday was like midnight.
Well, I got the press releases on Saturday.
I'm just saying.
So that was the official.
It still felt like Friday night if you were hanging around
Sure.
watching Twitter.
All right, so Frank, let's start with, I guess, Hellickson to Baltimore. We'll start there. And give us a little lowdown on that trade. They got an outfielder, they got a left-handed pitcher, and I guess an international signing bonus, the pull space, which is kind of well, maybe the story of the weekend with some of these deals.
Yeah, the Phillies didn't really get much back in that particular trade other than this. Essentially, what this trade kind of worked out to, we thought he might, Jeremy Hellickson might go to a team like the Royals or, maybe one of those minor league teams that is sort of hanging around in the playoff hunt, but can't afford a Sonny Gray, who, by the way, it looks like is going to the Yankees. So Hellickson is just kind of stopping some bleeding for Baltimore, and Baltimore put a couple $1 million back into their pocket in this deal. Kim, who is playing left field for the Phillies today, he is somebody that was owed $7 million over 2 seasons, and the Phillies kind of took him off their hands. They pretty much paid for Hellickson's contract as well, and then in return they get kind of a project that's Clevinger, who's going to probably start at Double-A Reading, it looks like, and they got this international slot money, which hopefully they could put to good use with some international free agent signings between now and July 1st.
For paying Hellickson what they have the last couple of seasons, do you feel like if you're a Phillies fan, is the message to them that you made out in the 2 years of Jeremy Hellickson? I mean, he didn't win a lot of games. I don't know. Is this return enough for what they decided to pay him?
I think the Phillies got what they needed out of him, which was essentially a veteran arm that would sort of slot into their rotation and let the younger guys develop a little bit along the way. They knew they paid him too much salary, but they didn't care because they knew they were going to get out from under that after this year. And so he kind of filled what they needed. Now you got to this point right now, and Ben Lively is a AAA, Zach Eflin is a AAA. There's Mark Leiter did a decent job in a couple starts, so they don't necessarily need him filling that role anymore. So now that that's over with, they were able to get something back, and by something was that spending flexibility over in the international signing pool.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. So Jeremy Hellickson, they ended up sending him to Baltimore. And for Baltimore's sake, I mean, they're not even really in this race, right? I mean, they're just hoping for something out of Hellickson out of this, right?
Well, they had, let's just say, not so much success when they threw out the likes of Alec Asher as in their starting rotation. This was just a stop the bleeding in their starting rotation, and we'll throw a few $1 million in our pockets again type move for the Orioles. They just seem to be motivated by clearing some salary, and the Phillies made it easy for them.
All right, Frank, how about the other deal they make, which is Howie Kendrick to Washington? Now, Kendrick was injured, so a lot of people were wondering whether or not the Phillies were going to be able to do something with him. They get a 21-year-old left-hander, and Clintack really spoke glowingly about Mackenzie Mills, but they got another international amateur signing bonus in that. This is one of those where you got a young kid who's got some tools, you're just kind of hoping. All right. I mean, we don't know a lot about the kid, but to get something for Kendrick's a win, I would think, right?
Well, yeah, and actually, this particular prospect, Mackenzie Mills, he actually profiles as somewhat of a decent prospect. And the reason why the Phillies got a better prospect out of this is they were willing to pay Kendrick's salary the rest of the way. So now the Nationals, they don't seem to have a lot of financial flexibility. They've got a couple starters that are out right now, and they could have used a little bit of an offensive boost, when the likes of Jason Worth and Trey Turner are out. So Kendrick's a nice player for them. He made his debut against the Colorado Rockies.
Did we lose Frank?
I think so. I hear you. Do you hear me?
I do. Is Frank still there? I guess he is not. Sports Bash
He's
Live.
going good?
You're
You
looking
just
at me.
run along?
You're looking at me, and
I'm looking at
I
you.
don't hear him any longer. All right, we lost Frank there, I think. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I believe he's at Citizens Bank Park with the Phillies game going on right now.
That could explain it.
By the way, we'll try to reconnect with him.
Yes. But he was talking about the prospects they got back. He also was talking about the international money they got back. I mean, these are the little moves that may not be grandiose at the time, but they're the kind of things that can play off. And at the very least, to the casual fan like myself, it's something where Matt Klentak is making moves. Last year at the trade deadline, Mike Gill, you remember that there really weren't moves made by Matt Klentak, and a lot of people thinking, geez, is this GM going to do anything? Is he going to make any changes? Well, at least this time. I mean, Neshek was a very easily movable
we're such
piece.
prisoners of the moment. Mm-hmm. So, like, at the time when the trade deadline comes around, you want to see your guy like action creates reaction. Mm-hmm. So if he makes any move, we just want to react to it. When he doesn't do anything, the perception is he's not doing anything. And okay, is he doing his job? Is he doing a good job? Is he doing a bad job? We always want to judge and put a grade on things. Sometimes not making a move, you just don't make a move just for the sake of doing it. And that gets lost sometimes. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's just like, you didn't do something because there was nothing to do. It didn't make a lot of sense. But let's call Frank back into the conversation here. We lost Frank Klose from 97.3 ESPN.com. He is back with us now, Frank. And we talked about Hellickson going to Baltimore, Kendrick going to Washington, and I guess Neshek. We'll kind of go back over that deal a little bit. Because I thought it was I wasn't here last week. I wanted to get your take on this. I thought it was interesting that one of the centerpieces of that deal was a shortstop. Maybe we don't have Frank back.
Right.
I'm being told we did. I'm being lied to.
He was there, and then he wasn't. And look, I'd like to know the answer to that question, too. I know at the time when they announced the trade, there was some conversation about, well, shortstop, a shortstop in the minor leagues sometimes ends up at third base or somewhere else on the infield. Just because he's a shortstop now and announced as a shortstop in the deal doesn't necessarily mean that shortstop is his place. But you wonder, Mike Gill, how much of that spin was spin of not ticking off J.P. Crawford of the world, or not ticking off somebody in the organization that's currently at the shortstop position or in the shortstop pipeline. You wonder if that was the case, because I heard a lot of commentary about that when the Neshek deal went down. But you're right, they got two. They were both right-handed pitchers from high A ball, and then they got a shortstop. And like you said, the shortstop's age indicates, like, hey, this guy's not 21 or 22. He's a little bit older.
Yeah, so I was interested to see that. I thought the shortstop they got back was 21. You might want to double check on that, because I
thought you just told me the shortstop. No, you were just impressed the fact that it was, or intrigued that it was a shortstop.
What I said was, I was surprised that the centerpiece of the deal was a young shortstop, because obviously their top prospect is already a shortstop who's very young in J.P. Crawford. Why would they be going out in a deal?
You're right. He's 20 years old, and he's an international signee out of Venezuela in 2013. He was the 21st ranked prospect in the Rockies organization. So you're right. Actually, all three guys are 20. Jose Gomez is 20. Alejandro Requena is a 20-year-old right-handed pitcher. And come on now, how can you not talk about J.D. Hammer? That is a PT name if there ever is one. And look at the glasses, Mike Gill. He's just like Charlie Sheen in Major League.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that this weekend. All right, I think we got Frank back and ready to go. Frank,
I'm on a landline, so hopefully this is better.
I was surprised that, I don't know, was the centerpiece of the Neshek deal, Jose Gomez, the shortstop. I was surprised that, that they would bring such a young shortstop back in a deal like that.
Well, you never know what you're going to need 2-3 years down the line. I mean, J.P. Crawford was drafted at age 18 and way back in 2013, so now this is 4 years later, so and still he has some development to go. So you never want to discount adding talent to your system because of what might happen down the line, because you never know. Maybe by the time the Phillies are buyers and looking to add a piece, Gomez is the piece that helps somebody else. So you just kind of want to add as much talent as you can. It's down at the lower levels, and you never know how it'll pay dividends for you later.
So what'd you think of the weekends for Matt Klentak? When you were off the line there, Pete and I were kind of going back and forth on, hey, last year Pete's saying, I just wanted to see him do something. He didn't do anything. And I said, well, sometimes you can't judge a guy just for not doing anything. Sometimes not doing anything is the smart move. So what did you think of the job that Matt Klentak did with moving guys like Pat Neshek, Hellickson, and Howie Kendrick as a group?
And keep in mind, Kendrick got hit on the hand by that pitch, so that could have been a problem too.
Yeah, I thought he did a tremendous job. Now, essentially what the Phillies did was they took on several salary dumps with the express purpose of flipping them for prospects down the line. I mean, even Jeremy Hellickson was somebody who they originally grabbed as a salary dump the previous year, if you remember when the Diamondbacks were putting together money to go sign Zach Greinke. So the Phillies didn't really give up much to get these players, and in return they have a handful of prospects. So they're going to add some more prospects from the international signings, which are yet to come. And that's really what you want to do when you're rebuilding. Now, some of their salary dumps they took on, like Clay Buchholz, aren't necessarily going to get you anything in return. And you look at Joaquin Benoit. Now, Todd Zalecki was sort of saying that maybe somebody would take him as like a backup plan when they don't get the reliever they want. But these were all players that essentially cost the Phillies next to nothing to acquire, and now they're walking away from it with a bunch of prospects. And meanwhile, a lot of their minor leaguers have developed this season along the way. So it was a good job. And when you accumulate those veterans like that, you kind of know going in that not all of them are going to work out. So I think they ended up doing very, very well if maybe about half of these types of players netted you some prospects.
Frank Klose with us, our Phillies Insider for 97.3 ESPN. So the natural question, Frank, then is, are they done? I mean, the trade deadline is today, but of course there's moves that could still be made after the trade deadline. Do you think they're finished for now, or do you think there are more moves in the pipeline?
Well, it looks like there's really not any interest right now in Tommy Joseph. I know that's somebody that they could consider moving if a team out there needed a right-handed first baseman, but right now the market isn't really established where some team would take somebody like Joseph. You might have to move him later on, and that probably means you won't see Rhys Hoskins down the line. The Benoit trade could happen in August. If he gets through waivers, which he probably will, nobody's going to claim the high dollars that he makes, which is about $7 million this year. You get him through waivers in August, he has a good few weeks. Somebody who is bleeding from the bullpen might take him off your hands. But other than that, that's probably it. I mean, there's very few players that would, kind of pass through waivers along those lines. And, if the Phillies want to be generous and let somebody like a Daniel Nava down the line, if another team claims him on waivers, they could essentially, let that team take him for cash. I mean, you're not going to get a lot for a utility outfielder, as you saw a couple of years ago with. Remember when the Phillies had Jeff Francoeur hanging around? They just said, well, we might as well keep him because you don't get anything back for players like this. So there's not a lot of moves left to be made, and what they might do is try to clear up some roster spots by simply designating a few players for assignment. One of whom being the newly acquired Kim. If they get to a point where they feel like they need the roster spot, I mean. You could easily throw Brock Stassi in that slot. It's sort of a left-handed backup who hits 200. So, they might make a few moves like that, but there's really nothing left major to do. They really, I thought, capitalized well on the three veterans that they had that were going to command some value in return.
Yeah, I saw Kim got the start and left today, but I also read that he was in AAA or in the minors when he heard about the trade from the Orioles. So obviously one of those tweener-type players. We're spending a few minutes with Frank Klose. What about all that talk with the Marlins, Frank? Is that fizzled out because we kept hearing those Giancarlo Stanton rumors flying by? Is that all gone by the wayside?
Well, right now the Marlins are in flux since they're probably going to be sold in the near future, and essentially what the Marlins' position is, though they traded their closer A.J. Ramos to the Mets, but essentially the big names they're kind of holding off on because they want the new ownership to make those decisions. And if you're somebody buying the club, you might want to make those decisions. If I'm spending $1.3 billion to buy the Marlins, I might want Giancarlo Stanton to be my centerpiece when I take the team. Now, you never know. Somebody else could acquire the team and say, hey, look, I want to clear all this money out so that I can sort of build this the way I want it. That could happen too. So I think the Phillies were just trying to use that financial flexibility to do whatever they could to sort of take advantage of the situation and take the players if there was an opportunity. But that opportunity really isn't there yet, and I think once the sale is completed, the Phillies will probably call the Marlins and say, hey, we've got tons of payroll flexibility, so send me your prospects, we'll take some of that money off your hands. But that's something which is going to probably develop down the line, not necessarily right now.
You mentioned you guys were talking about Tommy Joseph. If they can't move him, what's the future for Hoskins in the near future, in August, September?
Well, he slowed down a little bit in July, so he's probably staying put for now. We'll see what September holds. The Phillies do not have to bring him up this year. I know that's not what fans want to hear, but he's not on the 40-man roster. The Phillies don't have to put him on the 40-man roster until after the season, and they might want to do that way because it protects as many of their prospects as possible. So a lot will depend. A lot of it will depend on who else comes up. Do the Phillies want to give J.P. Crawford a look, perhaps, because he's playing well? That could be something which could be determined. Or, maybe the Phillies just stick with the guys on their 40-man roster come September, and then, Hoskins shows up at spring training and has a chance to battle for a job. But they're really not under any pressure to bring him up right now, being that he's not on the 40-man roster, and essentially you don't want to lose any of their prospects who are on the 40-man roster for that. But again, as I just said, somebody like Kim could be somebody that simply gets cut because Kim is not going to be part of the Phillies' future. He's only signed till the end of the year, and essentially he was a salary dump from the Orioles. So I think the Phillies are throwing him in there a little bit just to see what they can get out of him, but I don't think they really have him as part of their plan. So players like that could end up getting cut and opening up some space, but a lot of that will have to work itself out the rest of the season.
Frank Klose with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Frank, the Phillies have played better baseball. What are you attributing the actual better play on the field? A lot of the discussion about this team has been off the field or the problems they've been having on it, but why would you surmise that they've acted like, you probably, a lot of people listening might not be checking in every single night, maybe aren't watching, aren't figuring it out, but they have been playing better baseball. What are you attributing that to?
Well, a couple things. One, Odubel Herrera has absolutely turned it back on. I know for all the discussion about his bat flips, I think they bothered people more when he was hitting 180, and you're looking at the end of May. But he's just been absolutely stellar the last couple months, and he's really helped drive this offense. And it was also aided by the promotion of Nick Williams. Once they got Williams in there, they ended up with a starter that's going to play in the outfield every day from the left side, and simultaneously Aaron Altair, he's back up to full strength, and he's hitting as well. So they seem to have a lot of their pieces in place that they could not consistently have in place. And as good as Howie Kendrick was, he couldn't stay on the field. And the Phillies are a lot better off with a productive Nick Williams playing every day than Daniel Nava or Cameron Perkins or the sub-type players that got some starts in the outfield. Even Ty Kelly got some starts in the outfield. So they're a little bit more stable compared to where they once were. And even some of the lesser players like the Cameron Rupps who struggled earlier are actually hitting a little bit again. So all that kind of comes together to give it a little bit more stable of a lineup. And in some respects, too, the pitching rotation is sort of coming together as well. And a lot of these young pitchers are taking their turns every day, getting a little bit more experience. And Nick Pivetta did a nice job today, and he's kind of been working his way along, and he put them in a good position to win today. And so all this stuff is the type of thing that comes with experience. You get a little bit better, you get a little sharper, and certainly having a healthy lineup day in and day out doesn't hurt either.
Talking with Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. Today is the trade deadline for Major League Baseball. A guy that they don't want to trade is Nick Williams. You mentioned him, Frank. What do you think of him so far? Not Nick Williams. Yeah, the fact that they brought him up. What have you thought of him so far?
He's been a burst of energy, hasn't he?
He's been. He's at least a reason to turn the TV on and watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. He's brought a lot of energy. He hits from the left side, which is something that he didn't have with Kendrick, and he plays really good defense as well. And I think his maturity really is a lot to do with the success that the Phillies have been having, because down at AAA, he never really got to find his groove until a couple months beforehand. You know, he started walking a little bit more, and he's got the day off today because you know, they really were asking a lot. They really were asking a lot of him. You know, this young guy comes up, and they're actually batting him third in a lot of games. So, but yeah, he's a nice-looking player. I don't think he's the superstar type player, but I think he's the type that's going to give you an all-around solid play, offense, defense. You know, kind of like a 20-homer type kind of guy, more so than a 30-homer guy. But this is a really nice player that has a chance to make a lot of contact for you, and I think a lot of his development is yet to come. So he's, in a lot of ways, he reminds me of an Aaron Altair, but from the left side.
All right, and by the way, Altair's played pretty well since he's been back from the injury, Frank. I mean, he's a guy who missed, 2-3 weeks there and comes back and it started
1
to
for
hit the
3
ball
today with a hit and a run scored.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's looking really good, and it's a shame. You got to hope that these injuries aren't a constant thing, but they've just been little things like hamstrings, but they certainly require you to heal before you can be your old self. So, but he's looking really good right now, and giving him a big boost on both sides of the field, offense and defense.
What is your view of this Freddie Galvis, J.P. Crawford stare down that's inevitably coming? It seems like.
Yeah, it's really funny. This has grown to be like it's a quarterback controversy on Monday morning, right? So, but I think JP needs more time. I think he needs to play up until at least September 1st, or maybe even when the AAA season is over, kind of see where he is there. Freddie, I think he's giving you some of the best baseball of his career. Even when he was 19 years old in the Class A, you could look at Galvis and say, wow, what a glove this kid has, and his glove certainly does not disappoint. And right now, I think it's good that Galvis is there. He is the better defender. When you have this young pitching staff that's going to put a lot of balls into play, having a nice solid defense behind you goes a long way. It really is something that mentally for these pitchers, just to be able to relax and throw the ball, not worried about what's going to happen on the field once there's contact, really does make a big difference, especially up the middle. So he's giving them a lot in that regard. His bat still isn't where it could be, or where J.P. Crawford's bat could end up, and so Crawford, we got to see what happens with his defense a little bit. And the nice thing about Galvis is, even if he returns to a reserve player like he was for a while, he can play all over the diamonds, and he's a guy that's even started some games in the outfield for the Phillies over the years, and you throw him wherever you want, and you don't feel so bad about it. So there could be a way that they coexist on this roster, but I think until it's absolutely clear that J.P. Crawford is ready to come up, you just kind of roll with what's working, and hopefully it works out where you have two quality players on your major league roster at the end of all this.
All right, he's Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. Follow him on Twitter at Frank Klose with a K. And if anything breaks with the Phils between now and the trade deadline, we will certainly fill you in and let you know what's happening with that. Phillies and the Braves today. Markelle Fultz threw out the first pitch at the ballpark today. Was it over the plate there, PT?
I didn't see the pitch. I just see him with our director of fun and games, our buddy John Brazier, who looks like the old man in the seat. We got to talk to Brazier about this Hemingway look that he's got going on.
All right. Thanks, Frank. We appreciate it, pal.
Thanks, guys.